It's been the worst time of my life, Joe. If somebody accused me of raping them or hurting them, I have a 22-year-old daughter. I would never hurt anyone.
For more than 4 decades, one face has quietly anchored some of the most beloved black films in American cinema, without most audiences ever learning his name. Clifton Powell has played hustlers, fathers, villains, and loyal friends across more than 100 film and television credits. But behind that steady career sits a legal saga that dragged on for 6 years, sparked misleading tabloid headlines, and ultimately ended not in conviction, but in vindication. This is his real story, not the clickbait version. Clifton Powell was born on March 16, 1956, in Washington, D.C. Long before Hollywood, he trained as a stage actor, eventually earning an NAACP Theater Award for Best Actor for his work in The Talented Tenth. He toured nationally with a Negro Ensemble Company's celebrated production of A Soldier's Play, building the kind of theatrical discipline that would later define his screen work. Powell went on to study at Emerson College in Boston, sharpening the craft that would carry him into film. His screen career began modestly in the early 1980s, with small television roles that gave him little more than a foothold in the industry. It would take more than a decade of steady, often uncredited work before Powell found a role that changed everything. In 1993, Powell appeared in Menace to Society, the Hughes brothers' unflinching portrait of life in South Central Los Angeles. Playing Chauncey, Powell brought a gravity to the film that caught the attention of casting directors across the industry. The role became a turning point, opening doors to a string of acclaimed 1990s dramas, including Dead President in 1995 and Why Do Fools Fall in Love? That same busy stretch nearly cost him a different opportunity. Powell was originally cast in a supporting role in the Eddie Murphy vehicle Vampire in Brooklyn, but left the production after alleging a sound technician on set had directed a racist remark at him, a complaint he said the producers declined to act on. It wouldn't be the last time Powell spoke candidly about race and how it shaped his opportunities in the industry. By the late 1990s, Powell had become one of Hollywood's most dependable character actors, equally convincing as menace or comic relief. He appeared in Rush Hour in 1998, then found a new generation of fans playing Pinky, the fast-talking hustler in Next Friday and its sequel Friday After Next. The Pinky role, in particular, made him a favorite among fans of the Friday franchise, showcasing a comedic timing that stood in sharp contrast to his more menacing dramatic roles. Powell's most celebrated performance came in 2004, when he played Jeff Brown, the loyal road manager to Ray Charles, in the biographical drama Ray, starring Jamie Foxx. The film was a critical and commercial success, and Fox's performance as Charles won the Academy Award for Best Actor. Powell's own supporting work did not go unnoticed. He earned a nomination for the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Motion Picture, a recognition that placed him alongside some of the industry's most respected performers and validated 3 decades of steady craftsmanship. That same period brought a moment of reconciliation as well. A decade after leaving Vampire in Brooklyn over the alleged on-set incident, Eddie Murphy cast Powell in a supporting role in the 2007 comedy Norbit, a box office hit that introduced Powell to an even wider audience. By the mid-2000s, Powell had amassed a body of work spanning gritty urban dramas, mainstream comedies, and prestige biopics, a range few character actors ever achieve. He would go on to voice the character Big Smoke in the landmark 2004 video game Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, a role that introduced him to an entirely different generation of fans who had never seen his films. In September 2012, tabloid outlets reported that a Louisiana woman, identified in court filings by the pseudonym Keontae Myers, had filed a federal civil lawsuit against Powell. According to the complaint, Myers, a cocktail waitress the actor had met at a New Orleans casino, alleged that a sexual encounter with Powell on the night of August 28, 2011, began consensually but turned into a non-consensual assault after she asked him to stop. The suit sought more than $75,000 in damages for assault, battery, and emotional distress. It's worth being precise about what actually happened next, because the case's history is more complicated than most headlines suggested. Myers had reported the incident to police roughly a year after it allegedly occurred. Investigators looked into the claim but closed the case, citing insufficient evidence to support criminal charges. Powell was never arrested and never criminally charged at any point in this process. The civil case, however, took a strange procedural turn. Powell has said he was never properly served with the lawsuit and was unaware it existed. Because he didn't respond, a federal judge issued a default judgment against him in 2013, ordering him to pay roughly $150,000 in damages and medical expenses. For several years, that default judgment stood as the public record of the case, and it's likely the source of any characterization of Powell as having lost in court. That changed in early 2017. With new legal representation, Powell moved to have the default judgment vacated, arguing both that he had never been properly served and that inconsistencies undermined the claims against him. Central to that motion was a sworn affidavit from the lead detective who had originally investigated Myers's police report. The detective stated that when directly asked whether she had been forced or intimidated into any sexual activity, Myers had answered no. A federal judge agreed the case had significant problems, vacated the default judgment, and allowed Powell's defense to proceed. The legal fight didn't end there. Powell countersued for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress, but in January 2018, the same court dismissed those counterclaims as well, ruling they had been filed too late under Louisiana's one-year prescriptive period for such claims. With that ruling, both sides' claims were closed. Myers's underlying civil suit did not proceed to a trial verdict against Powell. The default judgment that had briefly stood against him was gone, and no court ever found him liable. What makes Powell's story worth telling accurately is not just the legal outcome, but what it reveals about the gap between a court record and a public narrative. For 6 years, from the initial tabloid report in 2012 through the final rulings in 2018, Clifton Powell and rape lawsuits sat next to each other in search results and entertainment headlines. The 2017 order vacating the default judgment and the detective's affidavit undercutting the original claim received far less coverage than the initial accusation had. That imbalance is common in how the entertainment press covers allegations against public figures. The accusation is news, but the walking back rarely gets the same spotlight. Powell has spoken in interviews about the toll this took on him professionally and personally, describing lost work, strained relationships, and the particular difficulty of defending his reputation as a father while an unresolved legal matter followed him through interviews and public appearances. He has also spoken more broadly, in interviews over the years, about the pressures Black character actors face in an industry that he has said too often reduces performers to narrow categories based on how they look rather than what they can do. Rather than disappearing after the lawsuit was resolved, Powell kept working, and kept working prolifically. Since the mid-2000s, he has built a second act largely outside the studio spotlight, appearing in a steady stream of direct-to-video and streaming projects, along with recurring television roles on shows like The Family Business, Saints and Sinners, and Army Wives. His credits today number well over 200 across film and television, a volume of work that places him among the most prolific character actors of his generation. Recent projects have included roles in BMF, Fight Night, The $1 Million Heist, and High Potential, showing an actor still very much active in the industry decades after his breakthrough in Menace to Society. Headlines describing Clifton Powell's final sentence or suggesting a criminal conviction get the story wrong. Powell was never charged with a crime. The civil case against him, after a lengthy and unusual procedural history, ended with the underlying claims never proven and his own counterclaim dismissed as untimely. A legal wash, not a defeat, and certainly not a sentence. What actually happened to Clifton Powell is a story about how a public figure can spend 6 years in legal limbo over an allegation that was ultimately undercut by the very detective who investigated it, and about how much of that nuance never reaches the headlines that first broke the story. Today, Powell remains one of the most recognizable supporting actors of his generation, not because his career ended in disgrace, but because it never actually stopped.